Good morning. We are living in a cultural landscape that is no longer dominated by primetime television or blockbuster movies. We haven't had entertainment capture the collective imagination in recent times. Rather, we are moving into another phase of media and entertainment known as niche pop culture. Today on the podcast, I'll be joined by Dowling pop culture expert Mr. Charlstrom and Ms. Pose to figure out how we got to the culture that we exist in today and what that means for our future. Stay tuned. All right.
Get a good side profile of you.
Welcome back to our program, Figuring It Out with Flutter. We have two very special guests. We have Mr. Charlstrom and Ms. Pose. They are the Dowling Catholic's resident experts on all things pop culture. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having us. Flattered and honored to be here.
Of course. So, within this class, we're going to be talking about the difference between mass pop culture versus niche pop culture. You just take a few moments to explain the key difference between those two things, according to how you see it. There you go.
Yeah, we kind of landed, we were discussing this
Okay.
yesterday in preparation, so we kind of landed on.
Basically, like mass pop culture is something that everybody would know a little bit about because it's so popular. And then we determined like niche is much more like what you're invested or what you're super into. And that if you're super into that, you're only going to focus on that topic or that group of people or whatever it might be.
Yeah, and the way that our social media is catered to us and tailored to us these days, if you are into something, it becomes a lot more curated to that taste. So for example, Charleston and I both love shoes. We both love shoes. And so we would probably have a little bit more knowledge on, shoe drops and what shoes are going for and like who's collabing with who, because we're already searching for that information. We're already finding that information. Charleston's a big basketball guy.
So like my social media and like my Twitter, for example, is full of NBA and basketball stuff because I want it to be where you don't care.
Well, it's not that I don't care,
Well,
but I'm not as deep into
it.
Yeah, deep into it. And so my Twitter, my Instagram, or my whatever is not going to curate that information to me because they know that I'm not liking that stuff, I'm not retweeting it, I'm not commenting on it. So yeah, essentially it's just the difference is, what is something that we collectively as a society all have access to and see and maybe know, whether that's like a meme or an event that happened or whatever, or what is something that maybe we're more of a little expert in on our own because we have taken the time to figure that out, or our social media has also helped us figure that out.
Very good. Sticking with that theme then of transitioning from mass pop culture being dominant to now niche pop culture being dominant, do you think within those circles of niche pop culture, they are more mobile in that they extend beyond just time and place and age, and maybe more people from different backgrounds can fit into that niche instead of just maybe young people watch this, old people watch this? It's kind of more encompassing. What do you all think?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I think it's even funny too that sometimes students will be surprised at, like what I listen to, what my Spotify looks like, or what music I listen to, because we might be listening to the same types of music, but obviously, we're different ages, we're at different phases of life. And so, yeah, I do think in a weird way it's made things more accessible because everyone has the opportunity, or maybe not everyone, but a lot of people have the opportunity to become experts or to explore these little niche areas of different parts of culture, whether that's fashion or music or sports or whatever it may be. So
I think music's a really good example.
Yeah.
And you talk about it with us, what we listen to versus what our students might listen to, because it is so accessible. I just think that students are greatly surprised when they hear, oh, like you listen to that kind of music, like you're a teacher, or like you're way older than us, or whatever the case might be.
Yeah.
It's like, no, like
why are you listening to Young Thug?
why are you listening to Young Thug, right? Where I think it's just students are taken back when you see that, and I just think that's because everything is so accessible these days.
Yeah, and same with like the idea of streaming services, right? Whether it's Apple Music, Spotify, does anyone still use Pandora?
Yeah, that's the thing.
Pandora maybe?
Yeah.
Any
Yeah.
streaming, but then the same with all the TV, like now. I remember when I used to we would sometimes have to wait week by week for something to come out. Now, like for example, I mean, I'm watching House of Dragon, don't know if anyone else is, but even though I have to wait every week for an episode to come out, I can choose when to watch that because of the streaming, right? So it's not like necessarily, I think sometimes the collective community gets taken away though with that, right? Because we have the choice and the opportunity to, when we want to digest something, when we want to engage with something, and there's not necessarily a time limit put on that. I think I strayed off from the topic, but
Oh, that's very good. And yeah, speaking of time limits, certain themes like 70s, 60s for homecoming or some kind of a party you hear about. Do you think, as you just mentioned, these demographics of age and everything else are merging together into these common niche cultures? Do you think that's kind of bringing an end to generational understandings of like 2020s, for example, to 1960s? Will that even be a thing anymore? Will there be trends from those time periods?
Like I was actually thinking about this with some of our homecoming stuff and ideas.
Yeah.
That, like, to me, if somebody said like dress like the 90s or dress like the 80s, I'm like, I have a general vague idea of what that means, but I really don't know,
yeah.
And like I don't know, I just think it's kind of interesting how you do kind of lose sight of that, or like what culture and what was cool back then, especially as we continue to get further and further away from it.
Yeah, well, and what I was kind of talking about with Mr. Charlstrom yesterday was how, and I've seen people having this discussion too of like, can anyone even be unique anymore? Right? Where it's like, we all have access to the same things. Everyone knows the trends, like, or trendy things at the same time. And also now too, we're kind of seeing this resurgence of like, thrifting is back in fashion again, right? And like, I mean, for like, I'm literally wearing Levi jeans I found at Goodwill, but like, Levi's, are having this resurgence, like just anything, it all kind of circles back. And so it's just interesting because it feels like, at least the last couple of years, for me personally, like nothing has been new. Everything has been like this, like recycled, like, oh, we're listening to, music and same with TikTok, like the sound bites of songs. Kids will start listening to music that they had no idea was a brand new music, but they're like, oh, well, it's a sound on TikTok. And it's just interesting because I think it's going to keep being kind of cyclical.
So kind of harkening back to that cyclical perspective, some people have taken that as a sign of social decadence where there's no longer any new innovation. We have to just do, a second version of something or recycling. Do you all think that the fact that we're having new trends from clothes or old sound bites come back on music, is that a sign that we're in a pop culture decay? Nothing new is being created?
See, and that's what I think is hard. I think that, because I mean, is new just something being created that's never been done before, or is it something new that is it something new that in the way that we're looking at it a different way, or we're incorporating it into a different element of our lives? Like it's really interesting because I feel like I go back and forth about that of like, can anything be new and created if like we already have access to everything and we feel like a lot of things have been done before? So then like how are we changing those like boundaries and limits of things?
I don't know.
Then I get existential about it.
That's good.
Like when you first asked that question, the first thing that kind of popped into my head was the thought of like when the iPhone came out, how like transformational that has been.
Sure.
And now like the iPhone 14 came out, how different is that really from, I think I had like an iPhone 11 or 12, like how much different, how much improvement can really be made after so many versions. So I don't know, I don't know, that's actually a really good question.
Yeah, or are we just like slightly modifying the things that we already have?
Yeah. I feel like we're more on that pace right now
Yeah.
than we are actually coming up with a brand new idea or concept or product. It's much more tweaking and improving something.
Mm-hmm. Well, and even too, if we want to go back to the music example, or even the shoes, like there are so many designers that are, paying homage to the people that came before them. Like I feel like I've been seeing, at least if we look at like, especially with the Nike Dunks, like so many color patterns that were really popular in the 80s and 90s, they're doing like a resurgence. And so certain shoes, it'll be like, we haven't done this color scheme of this Nike shoe since 1985. And it's like, we're
re-release it,
we're
the
gonna
hype will be there, the price will go up.
It's not new.
No, it's not new, but it's new to this generation. Oh, that's really cool. I want that pair of shoes.
Yep. And then also tying in that whole idea of like, ooh, like older and, you know, thrifting and like that's being trendy now, right? It's like not doing something that's brand new. But then it's like, if we're all doing it, how is it trendy, unique, or cool?
Yeah.
So that brings me to my next question, which is we do have different areas of niche culture, but yet you're both bringing up the point that it's hard to be original and that everything can spread so quickly. So where do you think you see more independent niche culture versus common mass culture? For example, you said clothes or something that everyone kind of sees and adapts to. Is it different in the way of entertainment or music? Is that more unique to people's tastes, or is that still pretty? Does that catch on as quick as clothes?
I think like you're still always gonna have like your top hits that are played on the radio that for the most part you have at least heard of it. You might not like it, but you might know who it is. But there is definitely like each music genre, even within the genre, like can be very niche.
Yeah.
Like you can get way deep into a certain artist or a certain type of rap music. And other people that might like rap are like, oh, I don't like that version of it. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
that's kind of how I do it, I guess.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think too, well, and even if you think about, okay, if we bring back to our earlier, you know, point of your social media and what you do have access to really kind of hand tailors like what your experience is going to be, thinking about at least shows and things, right? Like there's so many streaming services now. And so depending on, you know, what you maybe have access to or what you choose to participate in, like maybe you're watching the same show as millions of other people, or maybe like if you don't, you know, have HBO Max, like you're not watching, you know, Game of Thrones or what else is on? Yeah, a lot of things. But that might just kind of back to the point of like, what do we have access to? What are we choosing to explore? I think that so many areas of like what we kind of focus on, entertainment and creativity, do sort of intersect in a lot of like areas as far as referencing and making tributes to other things. So like in a lot of TV shows these days, you know, you'll see someone wearing a pair of, you know, limited release Nikes, or you will hear music being played that's maybe being played on the top 40, or maybe with someone that just won like a Grammy for their album. So it's kind of like it does intersect a lot, I do think. That answers your question.
Yes. This podcast is sponsored by the Flood Book. Are you interested in having a cookie for lunch and not really wanting to pay for it? Well, if you answer a question in my class or you do something for the benefit of the community, you might just find yourself getting a Flood Book. So do the right thing, do your homework, study when you can, and you might just win a Flood Book.
All right.
And we're back.
Yes, and we're back for our commercial break. So a couple more questions here. So with that intersection of culture, it is kind of interesting in that even though people are accessing it from their own devices and their own locations, there's a lot of, like you said, points that they meet that are in common, yet it seems in a lot of other ways we're really divided. So how do you reconcile that that point of we have different perspectives on things, political or current or otherwise, and we seem really divided, yet we all come together and watch and see the same things? You would figure that would bring us closer together. What do you all think? What's the cause of that? In your perspective.
I do, but I'm sorting through them. Do you want to go?
I guess I think
first
it.
comes to mind?
Yeah, I think what first comes to mind is you're right. We all have our different perspectives and opinions, political thoughts, whatever it might be, and we can be watching the same thing,
Right.
but we're only viewing it from like our previous thoughts and our background and our beliefs. We're only viewing that show or that topic or listening to that thought from somebody from the perspective we want to hear from, if that makes sense. So like if something is said and it's totally against like my own political beliefs, I'll just blow it. You know, it's common for people to blow it off and just be like, oh, like I disagree with that because I'm only looking at it from like my side.
Yeah.
Am I taking the time to think of it from the opposite side? I guess is kind of my thoughts.
Well, also too, and I mean, I'm sure a ton of people have seen this, but the Netflix documentary, The Social Dilemma, really dives into, again, and I mean, they look at it from the point of like kind of people sometimes maybe going to extreme lengths, but again, with the idea of Our phones are so smart, and these companies are so smart, and they want you to have the experience that you want to have on their apps. And so they particularly call out like Facebook and Twitter about how if Facebook or Twitter only sees you engaging with, you know, a certain agenda or a certain, you know, political side, they're just going to keep giving you stuff that's based off of that, to the point where maybe you don't even see the other side of it anymore because everything is so curated. And like Charleston was just sort of saying, if you're not in the business of going and looking for the other side of it, you're just going to keep getting what you want or what you've immersed yourself in, right? And I mean, like my Twitter, for example, like during all the political stuff, like my Twitter is mostly for me, like comedy and funny things. And sometimes a few like, you know, actual like news outlets are thrown in there. But because I'm not actively like searching for, retweeting, or commenting on political stuff, I would have to actively search for that on my Twitter, right? And so during like the election stuff, a lot of that wouldn't pop up unless it was like a huge thing that both sides of the spectrum were talking about, because that's not how I've curated my Twitter.
It's really interesting when you get into the political stuff,
Yes.
because there will be there is another side, regardless of where you are, that you're like, what are you talking about? Like, where are you getting this from? And again, you could be watching the same thing, listening to the same speech, and you're getting two wildly different perspectives.
Or seven, because at this point, you know, there's 30 sides to every story.
Yes.
So
that's really
yeah.
So last question to kind of put a positive end on this. We just got done talking about 7 potentially different perspectives on some kind of a current event.
Yeah.
What can we do to bring people together? And I want to say an old-fashioned way, but like Mr. Charleston was talking before, Jersey Shore, when I was in high school, it was like I think Thursday nights.
Yep.
You watched the
Thursday
episodes,
nights.
and he talked about, you know, what what's her name, Snooki was up to, and all that stuff.
Love that girl.
So maybe it doesn't have to be Jersey Shore, but what can we do to bring together our local communities? If you know, throw our differences aside and have fun doing something together. What are some things that you all recommend?
Bring back Jersey Shore. Bringing back honestly, I mean, this is gonna also kind of sound like I'm just ignoring everything we talked about, and I promise I'm not. But like the idea of going outside and touching grass, like I see that all the time of people being like, put your phone down and like go outside, like literally just go outside and touch grass. And again, that's like a very, you know, utopian generalized like solution to something. But I do think that sometimes we get so caught up in our like little worlds that we're carrying around with us that like what actually matters, right? And you know, as far as like, I mean, if we even want to think about like the mission of Dowling and like the mission of being, you know, a good human being and a good Catholic Christian person, it's, you know, do good to yourself and do good to other people, right? And so like, how can we do that if we're just absorbed in, you know, the latest shoe drop or the latest meme or the latest TikTok trend, or like, oh, can this pose take my Be Real today? Like, you know what I mean? And so it's just kind of like, how do we, you know, like recenter ourselves around something that is not just that perfectly curated little internet world we have?
It's really hard.
It's hard, yeah.
It's
There's not an
really
easy
hard.
answer, I don't think.
It is. I mean, it's so easy to say, like, I'm just gonna put my phone down and enjoy like what I'm doing in the present. But like you can do that and then like you're checking your watch because your watch is connected to your phone. Or then, you know, something happens like, oh, like I missed out on this. You know, and it's hard. If you could somehow put down your phone and just enjoy where you are like in the present, I think that would be a big like uplift to kind of just our community in general.
When I think about all too the different, like if we look at, you know, Dowling, we always kind of talk about we have a club for everything, right? And if we don't have your club, we're gonna make it, or we're gonna find it. And I do think that's really cool too, because whenever, you know, if you're here any given night and you're kind of walking around the building and seeing, you know, the sports that are going on or the different clubs and activities going on, like you see a whole lot of people interacting and they're not on their phones, right? And so I think that idea of like we can have common interests that maybe we're talking about them on social media or we're sharing them on social media, but like, what can we do in real life, right? Okay, if we're really into like arts and crafts, like let's do that in person too. And maybe like, let's get people to do that with us in person, and you can still kind of express yourself, explore maybe those little niches that you like, but you're doing it with people.
Kind of building that community around something
that you like. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you for coming in for this interview today. And you're always welcome back on the show.
Thank you.
Yes,
it has been awesome to be here. We appreciate it.
Sure.